The unexpected war. The Xalzoran Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 5,000 years. No species had ever dared to challenge their might. They had crushed every enemy before they could even become a threat. Their fleet was massive, their technology far beyond anything the younger races could imagine. So when their long-range scanners detected a small primitive planet on the edge of their empire, they hardly paid any attention. Earth. It was just another world. At least, that's what the Xalzoran thought. The initial reports were laughable. Humans were weak. Their bodies were small, their weapons old, and their armies nothing compared to the might of the Xalzoran legions. They still use projectile weapons, one Xalzoran officer scoffed. Metal bullets. How pathetic. The High Council of the Empire decided that Earth would make an excellent resource colony. Their world was rich in minerals, water, and biological specimens. The humans, they could be enslaved or eliminated. No one believed that Earth could fight back. The invasion begins. The first wave of the invasion came swiftly and without warning. A fleet of 30 warships entered Earth's orbit, launching energy bombardments on key military bases. The Xalzoran expected instant surrender. Most species did. The moment they saw the Empire's firepower, they gave up. But Earth did not surrender. Instead, within minutes, human forces retaliated. The first mistake. The Xalzoran ground forces landed in multiple locations, confident that the humans would run. But the humans didn't run. In New York City, when Xalzoran dropships descended, they were met with missile fire. Anti-aircraft guns tore through their shields, exploding their ships in the air. In London, human snipers took down Xalzoran warriors before they even stepped onto the ground. In Russia, an entire battalion of Xalzoran soldiers was wiped out by human artillery within 5 minutes. The invaders were shocked. "This is impossible," one Xalzoran commander shouted as he watched his forces falling one after another. "They should be inferior." The human response. But Earth's real response came next. Within hours, human forces launched a counterattack. The Xalzoran had expected a slow, desperate defense, but what they got was organized, brutal warfare. Human fighter jets outmaneuvered Xalzoran gunships, destroying them with precision strikes. Ground forces used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and surprise attacks, confusing the invaders. A single human commando team infiltrated a Xalzoran base and hacked into their communication system, sending false orders that caused entire platoons to walk into traps. The Xalzoran had never seen anything like this. The first retreat in Xalzoran history. For the first time in 5,000 years, the Xalzoran Empire suffered a defeat. The commanders, now realizing the true danger of humanity, ordered a retreat. As their warships began pulling out of Earth's orbit, human forces didn't let them escape so easily. A fleet of human submarines launched nuclear-tipped missiles at the retreating warships. Explosions lit up the sky, destroying half the fleet before it could jump to hyperspace. The Xalzoran barely escaped, limping back to their empire, their pride shattered. Back in the imperial capital, the High Council sat in stunned silence as they received the report. "This cannot be true," one of the elders whispered. An entire invasion fleet, defeated. By a primitive species. By humans. The Xalzoran had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated Earth, and now they had done something far worse. They had made humanity their enemy. And humanity never forgets. Humanity's true nature. The Xalzoran's worst fear. The Xalzoran Empire had suffered its first defeat in 5,000 years. The news spread like wildfire through the empire. This wasn't just a setback. It was an impossibility. A primitive species, one that hadn't even mastered FTL, faster than light, travel, had forced the empire to retreat. Their mighty legions had fallen, their warships destroyed, their soldiers hunted like animals on Earth. The High Council's emergency meeting. The Imperial High Council, the most powerful rulers of the Xalzoran Empire, gathered in the Grand Chamber. The air was tense. A massive holographic display showed Earth, still untouched, still defiant. Around it were the statistics from the failed invasion. 23,000 Xalzoran soldiers lost. 12 out of 30 warships destroyed. All ground operations failed. No prisoners taken. Casualties on the human side. Unknown. The counselors could not comprehend how this happened. They fight like beasts, said Elder Xanvak, his scaled fingers trembling. They should not have survived. They should have surrendered, and yet they didn't, said another elder grimly. We assumed them to be weak. But now we must ask ourselves, what are they really? A hush fell over the chamber. In the center, Grand War Strategist Kavlarek stepped forward. He was one of the few Xalzoran who had fought in multiple campaigns and had never lost a battle, until now. This species is unlike anything we've encountered, he said. His voice was heavy with unease. They are not physically superior to us. They are not technologically advanced. And yet, they fought with a ferocity and intelligence that we have never seen before. He looked around the room, his asterisk golden eyes filled with something none of them had ever expected to see in their greatest warrior: fear. If we do not understand how they fight and why they fight, we will lose this war. The hidden truth about humanity. At that moment, a smaller figure stepped forward. It was Vazek, the Empire's leading intelligence officer. His research division had been studying humans for years, collecting information on their culture, their evolution, and their psychology. His voice was calm, but there was a strange tension in it. I have reviewed everything we know about humans, their history, their biology, their wars. A new hologram appeared, showing centuries of human warfare, world wars, civil conflicts, revolutions, guerrilla tactics. He turned to face the council. We always believed that our empire was the most warlike species in the galaxy. He pointed at the screen. We were wrong. The elders stiffened. Humanity has been at war for most of its history, Vazek continued. They are not a peaceful species. They are not fragile. They are predators. A chilling silence filled the chamber. Vazek continued, his words sending a wave of unease through the room. They have fought wars longer than our civilization has existed. Their soldiers do not break. Their minds are built for adaptation. Their greatest strength is not their weapons, but their ruthlessness, their ability to strategize, their ability to endure pain and suffering that would kill any other species. The counselors exchanged nervous glances. We assumed they would fear us, Vazek said, but I have seen evidence of something far worse. He paused. They enjoy war. The room froze. No species had ever been like this. War was a tool for conquest, for power. Even the Xalzoran did not seek war. They simply fought because it was necessary. But humans, they had built cultures around battle. They had legends of warriors who sought war not for survival, but for the thrill of the fight. They call it glory, Vazek said, shaking his head. They tell stories of warriors who fight until their last breath. They celebrate war. They train for it constantly. Kavlarek clenched his fists. This means one thing, he said darkly. If we engage them again, they will not stop fighting. Vazek nodded slowly. Yes, and there is something even worse than that. He tapped the hologram, zooming in on one critical piece of data. A simple sentence recorded from a captured human radio broadcast during the battle. A message spoken by a human general just before he unleashed Earth's full counterattack. They came to conquer us. They thought we would bow. But they made one mistake. They made us angry. The room was dead silent. Then, for the first time in thousands of years, the High Council of the Xalzoran Empire felt fear. The nightmare has only just begun. Grand War Strategist Kavlarek exhaled. We must decide, he said finally. We can try again. We can send another fleet, a larger one." The counselors remained silent. "Or," he continued, "we can retreat from this sector and leave Earth alone." "Retreat," one of the elders snapped. "We are the rulers of the galaxy. We do not run." Kovalarik turned to him. "Then you have not seen what I have seen," he said quietly. His clawed hands shook slightly as he stared at the hologram. "This is not a war we can win with brute force," he murmured. "If we push them too far, they will not stop until every single one of us is dead." The counselor scoffed. "They are just one world. We are an empire of 1,000 worlds. How could they possibly?" Kovalarik interrupted him, his voice low and filled with something close to dread. "I saw it in their eyes." He turned back to the hologram, staring at the image of Earth, glowing like a small but unbreakable ember in the darkness of space. "They are not afraid of us." He looked up at the council, his golden eyes filled with certainty. "If we force them into a real war, they will burn the galaxy to the ground before they lose." Silence. No one spoke. No one dared to. Because in their hearts, they all knew. Humanity was a nightmare the Xalzoran Empire had just awakened. And now, it was too late to run. Humanity's response: "The storm is coming." The Xalzoran Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had attacked Earth, believing it to be a weak, insignificant world. But now, their first fleet was destroyed, their soldiers hunted, and their empire, for the first time in history, was shaken by the realization that they had awakened something far worse than they ever imagined. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. They were a species that fought back. And now, they were angry. The Terran military's immediate response: deep beneath the Earth's surface, inside a classified war room, the highest-ranking leaders of Terran Defense Command sat around a holographic display. At the head of the table stood Admiral Jonas Vance, a veteran of 100 battles, now staring at something no human had ever faced before: an interstellar war. The room was silent. Everyone had just seen the reports. They had all watched the Xalzorans' failed invasion attempt. And now it was humanity's turn to act. A grizzled general broke the silence. "They thought we'd surrender," he growled. "Instead, we tore their fleet apart." A younger officer scoffed. "These aliens have no idea who they just pissed off." Admiral Vance nodded slowly. "They came here expecting weakness. What they got was hell." He turned to a massive galactic star chart, which now displayed the Xalzoran Empire's territory. "We have a decision to make," Vance said grimly. "Do we wait for them to return? Or—" he paused, letting the tension build. "Do we take the fight to them?" The entire room fell silent. Then, slowly, an old general leaned forward, his voice ice-cold. "We hunt them down." Vance nodded, turning back to the star map. "Their empire spans 1,000 systems," he said. "But their supply lines, their borders, their outposts, they're vulnerable. They're not built for a war like this. They've never fought humans before." He turned to the gathered officers. "So let's show them what that means. Operation Silent Requiem. Humanity's first galactic strike." The response was immediate. Within hours, the greatest military mobilization in human history had begun. Black Ops teams deployed deep behind enemy lines, infiltrating Xalzoran outposts. Covert listening stations intercepted alien communications, feeding intelligence to Earth's commanders. Prototype stealth warships, built in secret by the Terran military, were activated for the first time. These weren't massive, lumbering fleets like the Xalzoran used. No, humanity didn't fight that way. They didn't fight fair. They fought smart. The first strike, disrupting the Empire. The Xalzoran Empire was vast, but it was built on control, not resilience. Their fleets were powerful, but they relied on centralized logistics. Their outposts and colonies were not fortified for war, because for 5,000 years, they had never needed to be. That was their greatest weakness, and humans exploited it mercilessly. Target: Sol-Zoran Supply Depot, Sector 18-04. A small, unimportant outpost, barely guarded. For the Sol-Zoran, it was just a routine stop along their supply lines. For the Terran Special Operations Division, it was an opportunity. A team of 5 elite operatives, clad in adaptive stealth armor, infiltrated the facility under the cover of darkness. No alarms, no detection. Within minutes, the station's fuel reserves were rigged with explosives. The control systems were hacked, sending false reports to the Sol-Zoran command network. By the time the first explosion ripped through the depot, it was already too late. The entire station vanished in a firestorm, and not a single human was detected. Target: Sol-Zoran Warship Manufacturing Center, Torzek Prime. A facility responsible for producing 10 warships per cycle. It was critical to the Empire's war machine. 1 human stealth ship, 4 torpedoes. By the time Sol-Zoran authorities realized they were under attack, the entire facility was reduced to debris. Hundreds of thousands of tons of starships, destroyed before they ever left the docks. The Sol-Zoran were not prepared for this kind of war. They were used to facing large, overwhelming enemy fleets. They weren't used to ghosts striking from the shadows. And they were terrified. The Sol-Zoran Empire's growing fear. Back on the Sol-Zoran homeworld, the news of the mysterious attacks spread rapidly. Entire military convoys were vanishing without a trace. Supply stations were destroyed overnight. Commanders were losing contact with their own fleets. And worst of all, there was no clear enemy to fight. This wasn't a war of 2 massive fleets clashing in space. This was a systematic dismantling of the Sol-Zoran's ability to fight back at all. The ultimate message. And then, one day, the Terran forces left a message. It appeared on the main Sol-Zoran military network, broadcasted on every encrypted channel. A single sentence. Run. It was simple, cold, terrifying. And for the first time in thousands of years, the rulers of the galaxy had no idea what to do. The war had only just begun. Admiral Jonas Vance stood on the bridge of the TNS Revenant, Earth's most advanced warship, watching the holographic battle map. The Sol-Zoran were panicking. Their fleets were repositioning defensively, trying to protect their empire. Vance smirked. "They're afraid," he muttered. His second-in-command, Captain Rice, chuckled darkly. "Let them be. They deserve it." Vance nodded. "They started this war. They thought they could take our home." He turned to the rest of his crew, his voice carrying through the command deck. "Now, we take everything from them." The humans had made their choice. They weren't just going to defend Earth. They were going to burn the Sol-Zoran Empire to the ground. And no one, not the High Council, not their war fleets, not even their gods, could stop them now. The Sol-Zoran's desperate counterattack. The beginning of the end. The Sol-Zoran Empire was in chaos. For the first time in 5,000 years, they were not the hunters. They were the hunted. Their fleets were being picked apart, their supply lines disrupted, and their empire, once thought indestructible, was starting to crumble from the inside. They had expected a war of conquest. What they got was a war of annihilation. And the worst part, they still hadn't seen the full strength of humanity, the High Council's last hope. Inside the Imperial War Chamber, the Sol-Zoran High Council gathered once more. The air was thick with fear. It had been only 3 weeks since their invasion fleet had retreated from Earth. And yet, in that short time, 4 major Sol-Zoran war factories had been destroyed. Over 100 supply convoys had been obliterated. Entire fleets had gone missing, vanishing without a trace. The mighty empire that had ruled the stars for thousands of years was now bleeding out. "We are losing," Elder Xanvak whispered, his voice trembling. Grand War Strategist Kavlarik stood at the head of the table. His once proud golden armor was now dull, his confident aura shattered. "I warned you," he said coldly. I told you what these humans were." He gestured to the massive holographic map in the center of the room. The Uxal-Zoran Empire, once sprawling and untouchable, now had dozens of red marks, signs of human attacks. "They don't fight like any species we've ever encountered," he continued. "They strike from the shadows, attack where we are weakest, and vanish before we can retaliate. They are not an enemy we can defeat through strength alone." Silence. Then, Elder Raquel, one of the few counselors who had always believed in the Empire's invincibility, clenched his fists. "You are all cowards," he spat. "We are the rulers of the galaxy. We cannot let these primitives destroy us." Kovlarek's golden eyes darkened. "Do you still think they are primitive?" he asked. He tapped a button, and a new image appeared in the hologram. A wrecked Uxal-Zoran dreadnought, its hull torn apart by unknown weapons. This was the Bloodfang, one of our most powerful warships. It was destroyed by a single human attack group. Raquel sneered. "They ambushed it. They fight like cowards." "No," Kovlarek interrupted. "They fight like predators." He turned back to the council, his voice cold and sharp. "We have one chance to stop them. We must strike Earth now, with everything we have left." Operation Starfire, the Uxal-Zoran's last stand. Desperation had driven the Uxal-Zoran into madness. They gathered every remaining fleet they had, forming an armada unlike any seen in galactic history. 3,000 warships, 2 super dreadnoughts, over 2 million soldiers. It was a force designed to erase Earth from existence. This time, one general growled, "We will burn their world before they can resist." The plan was simple. Destroy Earth's orbiting defense stations. Bombard major cities from orbit, wiping out infrastructure. Deploy ground forces to eliminate survivors. No prisoners. No negotiations. Just pure, merciless destruction. The final fleet of the Uxal-Zoran launched from their homeworld, heading straight for Earth at maximum speed. This was it. The war would end, one way or another. The arrival, a fatal mistake. As the Uxal-Zoran fleet exited hyperspace, they expected to find Earth unprepared. They expected to see a frightened species, caught off guard by the sheer scale of the attack. Instead, they found hell waiting for them. The moment the Uxal-Zoran fleet appeared, they were met with a sight they had never imagined. A human fleet. And not just any fleet. A supercarrier formation consisting of 5 massive war carriers, each larger than a Uxal-Zoran capital ship. Over 100 destroyers, armed with weapons the Uxal-Zoran had never seen before. Swarms of human fighter squadrons, already in attack formation. And at the center of it all, a single warship, the TNS Revenant. Admiral Jonas Vance stood on the bridge, watching as the Uxal-Zoran fleet stopped in sheer disbelief. "You came to burn our world," he said, his voice transmitted across the battlefield. His lips curled into a smirk. "Now let's see if you can survive ours." The Battle of Earth. Humanity's wrath. The human fleet struck first. The Uxal-Zoran expected standard plasma-based weapons, the kind most galactic empires used. But humans didn't use plasma weapons. They used railguns. Massive electromagnetic cannons that launched solid metal projectiles at near-light speeds. Uxal-Zoran shields were built to withstand energy weapons. They were not built to withstand a 10-ton tungsten slug moving at 99% the speed of light. The first volley of human fire shredded the Uxal-Zoran's frontline ships instantly. Their dreadnoughts, which had once led the Empire's greatest conquests, were ripped in half before they could even fire a shot. Panic spread through the Uxal-Zoran fleet. "This is impossible," one commander screamed. They're tearing through us like we're nothing." And then, the worst happened. The Revenant activated its experimental weapon, a device so powerful that humanity had never dared to use it in war before. A gravity well disruptor. It generated an artificial black hole right in the center of the Uxal-Zoran fleet. Ships collapsed inward, crushed into nothingness. The mighty armada of the Xalzoran Empire was obliterated within an hour. No survivors. No escape. Only silence. The end of the Xalzoran Empire. Back on the Xalzoran homeworld, the High Council watched in horror as the last transmissions from their fleet went dark. Their empire had been broken. Their fleets, their soldiers, gone. And then, a final message came through. From Earth. It was Admiral Vance's voice. Calm. Cold. Your empire is dead. Your war is over. Earth remembers, and now so will you. Then, silence. The Xalzoran Empire, which had ruled the stars for 5,000 years, had finally met its end. Not by a grand rebellion, not by an internal collapse, but by a single mistake. They had attacked Earth, and they had paid the price. The Empire's ashes. The last Xalzoran decision. The Xalzoran Empire was dead. What was once the greatest military force in the galaxy had been eradicated in a single unforgiving night. Their fleets shattered. Their armies annihilated. Their homeworld, now nothing more than a dying shadow of its former glory. And humanity. They had delivered their final warning. The survivors, nowhere left to run. For the first time in their history, the Xalzoran were running. The last remnants of their once great empire, a few warlords, scattered fleets, broken soldiers, had flowed into the darkness of deep space. But there was no sanctuary left. The Xalzoran's former allies abandoned them, fearing humanity's wrath. Their colonies revolted, seeking freedom from their fallen masters. Their trading partners cut them off, unwilling to risk their own destruction. For the first time, the conquerors of the stars had become the prey. And the worst part, humanity wasn't even chasing them. Because they didn't need to. The galaxy had seen what Earth was capable of. And no one would ever challenge them again. The High Council's last gathering. Deep inside a hidden bunker on Xaltora, the last remaining members of the Xalzoran High Council gathered one final time. There were only 4 of them left. Elder Xanvak, once the voice of power, now a broken old fool. Elder Raquel, his arrogance shattered, his body trembling from fear. Grand War strategist Kavleric, the last true warrior of their kind, now left to watch his empire burn. And Vozek, the intelligence officer, the only one who had seen this coming. They sat in silence, surrounded by holograms displaying every loss, every defeat, every shattered fleet. And for the first time in their history, the Council had no plan. No way forward. Nothing left. Just the reality of their own extinction. What? What do we do now? Sanvak's voice was hoarse, weak. Vozek let out a bitter laugh. What do we do? He repeated. We die. That's all that's left. Silence. Then Raquel slammed his fist onto the table. No, he growled. We cannot give up. We still have ships. We still have weapons. We can. Kavlarek cut him off. With what? Raquel turned to him, his eyes burning with desperation. Kavlarek leaned forward, his voice cold and final. Our armies are gone. Our fleets are dust. Our resources, depleted. We have no allies, no trade, no ability to rebuild. He gestured to the holographic map. The entire Xalzoran Empire was marked in red, destroyed. There is nothing left, he whispered. We are nothing. Raquel's breathing grew ragged. His hands trembled. No, no, we are the Xalzoran. We ruled the stars. We heir. You were, Vozek interrupted. His voice was like a death sentence. You were the rulers of the stars. He leaned back, his expression tired. Now, you're just ghosts. The message that changed everything. As the final remnants of the High Council sat in hopeless silence, a sudden alert filled the bunker. A communication, but not from their own forces. From Earth. The room froze. For a moment, no one spoke, no one moved. Then, slowly, Kavlarek stepped forward and accepted the transmission. A hologram flickered to life. And there, standing in perfect, unshaken confidence, was Admiral Jonas Vance. His gaze swept across the last of the Xalzoran leaders. They had once been the most feared rulers in the galaxy. Now they looked like cornered animals. "I expected more of you," Vance said, his voice carrying no emotion. Silence. The humans hadn't destroyed them yet. But they could. Kavlarek exhaled, stepping forward. His voice was calm, but behind his golden eyes, Vance could see something new. Acceptance. "We underestimated you," Kavlarek said simply. "We thought you were weak. We were wrong." Vance nodded. "Yes, you were." Kavlarek inhaled deeply. "So tell me, human." He straightened, standing tall for the last time. "Are you here to finish us?" The room was dead silent. Then, to their shock, Vance shook his head. "No," he said. The last survivors of the Empire stared in disbelief. "No," Raquel hissed. "You crushed our fleets. You wiped us from the stars. And now you're just going to walk away." Sanvak whispered, his voice filled with fear and confusion. Vance's expression didn't change. "You are already dead," he said simply. "Your empire is dust. Your fleets are gone. The galaxy has already turned against you." He folded his arms. "Killing the last of you is a waste of time." The council sat in stunned silence. After everything, humanity was letting them live. Kavlarek narrowed his eyes. "You're not just doing this out of mercy," he said carefully. "What do you really want?" Vance smirked. "Simple," he said. "I want you to remember this day." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "I want you to remember what happens when you challenge Earth." He let the words sink in. Then he stepped back, giving one final message. "We don't need to kill you. You'll die on your own. Alone. Forgotten. Ashes in the void." With that, the transmission cut off. And the last of the Xalzoran realized the truth. They had lost everything. Their empire, their power, their future. And now, they weren't even worth killing. They had become nothing. And as the bunker grew silent once more, Kavlarek turned to the others and spoke the last words of their empire. "They warned us," he murmured. "They told us to run." He closed his eyes. And we didn't. The end of an age. The rise of humanity. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Xalzoran Empire was dead. And Earth, it had risen. For the first time in history, humanity was feared. They weren't just another species anymore. They were the new apex predators of the galaxy. And no one would ever challenge them again. Because now, the entire universe knew the truth. When humans go to war, they don't fight to win. They fight to end you. Humanity ascends. The new galactic order. The Xalzoran Empire was gone. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy, who had conquered and enslaved entire civilizations for thousands of years, had been wiped from existence. Not by another great empire. Not by a rebellion of their own people. Not by internal collapse. But by one world. By humans. Now, in the void left behind, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. Would humanity take the throne? Or would they walk away, leaving the galaxy to wonder if they would ever strike again? The fear of the galaxy, the new power vacuum. The fall of the Xalzoran sent shockwaves across every star system. Governments scrambled for information. Former Xalzoran vassal species, once powerless, once enslaved, were now free, but terrified. Because now there was a new threat. A species that had not just defeated the strongest empire in history, they had erased it from the stars. The Galactic Council, a once weak political body made up of smaller factions that had lived under the Xalzoran's rule, now had one decision to make. Do we bow before Earth or prepare for war? Leaders from across the stars met in a neutral system, their fleets hovering nervously as their envoys debated the most critical question in the history of the galaxy. A trembling representative from the Heskari Union, a feline-like species that had lived in fear of the Uxal-Zoran, spoke first. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice uneasy. "They haven't conquered any Uxal-Zoran worlds," the reptilian leader of the Drask Consortium growled. "They destroyed their fleets, shattered their armies, but left their cities standing. This makes no sense." A Crixian diplomat, his insectoid limbs clicking nervously, spoke next. "They didn't conquer," he whispered. "They just ended them." A hush fell over the room. There was no occupation, no puppet rulers, no earth banners raised on the ruined capital of Zaltora. Humanity had fought their war and then vanished. That was what terrified them the most, because it meant humans didn't want an empire. They only wanted revenge. And now that they had it, no one knew what they would do next. The final message from Earth. As the Galactic Council continued their desperate discussion, an urgent transmission interrupted them. From Earth. The room froze. Every representative turned to the holographic display as the Terran emblem appeared, a sigil never before seen on a galactic level. Then, a face appeared. Admiral Jonas Vance, the human responsible for the destruction of the Uxal-Zoran Empire. He stared at them, his expression calm, calculating, and completely unreadable. And then he spoke. "The war is over." His voice echoed through the chamber. "We did not seek this conflict, but when the Uxal-Zoran came for us, we responded the only way we knew how." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You wonder if we will take the throne, if we will replace the Uxal-Zoran as rulers of the galaxy." Another pause. Then, to the shock of every alien present, Vance shook his head. "We do not want your empire. We do not want your planets. We do not want your submission." Confusion spread through the room. This made no sense. Why would humanity refuse ultimate power? Vance's voice turned colder, sharper. "We only want one thing." The room held its breath. Vance's eyes burned with an intensity that sent a chill down every alien's spine. "Remember what happened here. Remember what happens when you try to take what is ours." The representatives exchanged nervous glances. "We are not your overlords. We are not your saviors. But if any of you dare cross us again..." Vance leaned in. "We will not stop next time." The hologram cut out. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Then, for the first time in galactic history, the ruling species of the universe came to an unspoken agreement. Earth would never be touched. Not by war. Not by politics. Not by conquest. Because there was one law now. Never make an enemy of humanity. Earth's future. The hidden power. Back on Earth, Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the TNS Revenant, staring at the display of 1,000 alien factions retreating from human space. "They believed us," Captain Rice asked beside him. Vance chuckled, shaking his head. "They don't believe us," he said. "They fear us." Rice smirked. "So what happens now?" Vance turned, staring at the Earth below. "Now," he said, exhaling slowly. "Now, we build." Humanity had won. But the war had taught them something far more valuable than conquest. It had shown them that they were not alone. That they were not the weakest species in the galaxy. That they were not prey. And now, with the Uxal-Zoran gone, Earth had a new mission. To grow. To expand. To prepare. Because if one empire had attacked them, others would try again. And when they did, humanity would be ready. The unseen shadow. A new threat rises, but deep in the void. Beyond even the ruins of the Uxal-Zoran Empire, something else was watching. A species older than the Uxal-Zoran. More advanced. More powerful. And now, for the first time in thousands of years, They were interested. A figure sat on a throne of obsidian, its alien eyes narrowing as it watched the last broadcast from Earth. A chilling smile spread across its face. "So, the humans have finally revealed themselves," it murmured. It leaned forward, eyes gleaming with amusement. "Perhaps this game isn't over after all." A dark chuckle echoed through the void. And far, far away from Earth, in the darkest reaches of space, a new war had already begun. Humanity had won the first battle. But the war for the galaxy's future had only just begun. The next war, the shadows stir. The galaxy had changed. The Zoran Empire was no more. Humanity, once an insignificant species on the edge of space, had become something far greater, something the galaxy had never seen before. Not conquerors, not rulers, not diplomats. A warning. A force that, when provoked, did not seek power, but absolute destruction. Now, the galaxy held its breath, hoping that Earth would fade into silence once more. But in the darkness beyond known space, something else was moving. Something that had been waiting, watching. And now, for the first time in millennia, it was waking up. Because humanity had just proven itself worthy of a far greater war. The hidden power. A forgotten species watches. Beyond the ruins of the Zoran Empire, past the shattered fleets and lifeless worlds, a new presence lurked. They had been there long before the Zoran ever claimed their first world. Long before any known empire had risen and fallen. They were the architects of the stars, the rulers of the void, the silent overlords of the galaxy. And now, after ages of watching, they had finally seen something interesting. Inside a vast structure, a megastructure larger than any planet, hidden deep in a forgotten nebula, a figure sat upon a throne of void metal. Its body was shrouded in a cloak of darkness, its features unreadable. But its eyes gleamed with amusement. A voice, smooth as silk, echoed in the vast chamber. "They have destroyed the Zoran." A ripple of energy passed through the room as dozens of figures, tall, slender, and ancient beyond reckoning, turned their attention to the central throne. Another voice, layered and ethereal, responded. Their war was effective, brutal, calculated. The figure on the throne smiled. "They are unlike any species we have observed before." A pause. Then a whisper, so soft it barely registered. "They remind me of us." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then another voice, this one heavier, filled with a weight that seemed to bend reality itself. "They are not ready." The figure on the throne tilted its head. "Not yet," it agreed. "But soon." It leaned forward. "It is time to test them." Earth's new path, the birth of the Terran Empire. Back on Earth, deep beneath the surface, inside the most classified military installation on the planet, Admiral Jonas Vance stood before a council of leaders. The war against the Zoran had ended, but humanity's true war had only just begun. Around him, Earth's greatest minds, scientists, generals, strategists, gathered in the underground fortress known as the Vault. This was the real seat of power. This was where humanity would decide its future. Vance's voice was calm, but firm. "The galaxy now fears us," he said, looking around the room. "They have seen what we are capable of. And because of that, they will never dare challenge us again." A murmur of agreement. "They call us monsters, demons, executioners," Vance continued. "They whisper our name in fear." He turned, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Good." Silence. Then, a quiet chuckle from one of the generals. "They should be afraid," the general said, "because this time, we're not stopping." Vance nodded. The Zoran fell because they were arrogant, because they believed themselves untouchable. He leaned forward. "We will never make that mistake." His voice dropped, filled with something far more dangerous than anger. Cold, calculated determination. The universe is vast, and we now know one thing for certain. He tapped a control panel, and the hologram above them shifted. It was no longer a map of known space. It was something bigger, older. A map of the void beyond, the places no empire had ever reached. The regions where legends whispered of ancient beings that should not exist. Vance's gaze hardened. We are not alone. Another murmur. Tension rose in the air. The war against the Xalzoran had revealed far too much. Strange signals, lost civilizations, ghost fleets drifting in the darkness, and most terrifying of all, evidence that someone, or something, had been watching them, waiting. Vance turned back to the room. Our war with the Xalzoran was a lesson, he said. A lesson that if we do not prepare, if we do not grow, we will be next. He raised his hand, and a new image filled the hologram. Not a defensive fleet, not a diplomatic alliance. A war machine. A new fleet, larger than anything humanity had ever built. A single name was displayed beneath it. Project Revenant. The time for defense is over, Vance said. A pause. Then his final command. We expand. We build. We prepare. His voice turned cold. And the next time something comes for Earth, we will not be caught waiting. He turned to his officers, his generals, his scientists. From this day forward, he declared, we are not just a single world. We are not just a species. He took a breath. We are the Terran Empire. The first contact, the return of the Ancient Ones. Far away from Earth, in the unexplored reaches of space, a small human scout ship, the TNS Pathfinder, moved carefully through an unknown sector. Its mission was simple. Explore, expand, secure new worlds for humanity. But what it found would change everything. Inside the cockpit, Lieutenant James Halloway frowned as his ship's scanners began flashing red. An energy signature, one that should not exist, was ahead of them. His co-pilot, Ensign Carter, paled. James, she whispered, I don't think we're alone out here. Ahead of them, something massive loomed in the darkness. Not a planet, not an asteroid, not a ship. Something older, something ancient. And then, before they could react, a message came through. A voice, smooth, deep, and impossibly alien. We have been watching. The cockpit filled with a strange, eerie hum, a signal not of sound, but of something deeper. The voice continued. You have proven yourselves worthy. Now, let us see if you are ready. The ship's alarms screamed as an unseen force seized control. And as the screen flickered, displaying symbols older than the stars, Lieutenant Halloway realized one terrifying truth. This was not an enemy like the Xalzoran. This was something far worse. And humanity had just caught their attention.